Usually when we talk about achieving fluency in a new language, there's this expectation of like incredibly heavy lifting.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive undertaking.
Right. You tend to view it like you're building a massive skyscraper, right? You think you need thousands of vocabulary words, these complex grammatical blueprints, and just, years of absolute sweat equity before you can even open the doors.
Yeah, it feels like this monumental task. Like you picture giant textbooks, endless flashcards, and a very rigid, unforgiving structure where, every block has to be perfectly placed or the whole thing just comes crashing down.
Exactly. But it's actually a complete structural illusion. And today, we're looking at an excerpt from the Emma Talks podcast that basically proves fluency doesn't actually come from those massive vocabulary blocks.
It really doesn't.
Yeah. So we're looking at a specific lesson featuring Emma, who is an English instructor, and her student, Jack. And the core premise here is that a surprisingly simple shift, using literally just 3 tiny words, can instantly elevate how natural you sound.
Which is such a wild concept when you first hear it.
Totally. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because if you are trying to master any new skill, discovering that the secret might lie in the smallest components rather than the largest ones, well, it forces you to completely rethink your approach.
It really does require a perspective shift. I mean, for anyone listening, what Emma does in this exchange is systematically dismantle the intimidation factor of language learning.
Right.
She tells Jack right out of the gate that these 3 specific words are the key to sounding smoother. But, we have to look at the immediate, very human reaction Jack has to this claim.
Oh, for sure, because it mirrors the exact reaction most people have when presented with a simplified solution to a complex problem.
Exactly.
Jack stops her immediately. He says, wait, only 3 words. That sounds too easy, Emma.
Yeah, he's totally skeptical.
And we really have to sit with that skepticism for a second. I mean, we are so deeply conditioned to believe that if something is easy, it inherently lacks value, right?
Oh, it's wonderful.
We equate fluency with difficulty. We just assume that to sound native, we need to deploy these complicated, multisyllabic words, not tiny ones.
It's the psychological burden we place on expertise. We think expertise must be visibly difficult to be legitimate. But Emma's response to Jack's skepticism is basically the foundational argument of her entire curriculum.
Which is what?
Well, she tells him, I know, Jack, but fluent speakers use small words naturally, and that's what makes their English sound smoother.
Ah, I love that.
Right. She is introducing a concept here that linguists literally spend years analyzing. Fluency isn't always about the raw data you are transmitting. It is about the connective tissue between the data.
The connective tissue. Let's explore that. Think about cooking.
Okay.
When you're trying to elevate a dish, your first instinct might be to add a rare, complex, hard-to-pronounce ingredient. But often, the thing that actually bridges the flavors and makes the dish cohesive isn't an exotic spice.
Right, it's something basic.
Exactly. It's just a pinch of salt. The salt doesn't overpower the meal. It fundamentally alters how the existing ingredients interact, It smooths out the harsh notes.
That's a perfect way to look at it. The words Emma is introducing operate precisely like that linguistic pinch of salt. They do not change the core grammatical meaning of the sentence. What they change is the conversational pragmatics, like the way the sentence is received by the listener.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because if I put myself in the shoes of someone actively learning a language, this advice sounds counterintuitive. Think about an engine, right? If a machine is already struggling to run, you don't add more moving parts to it.
That's a fair point.
Adding more gears creates more friction. If a learner is already experiencing high cognitive load just trying to remember basic verbs and nouns, actively forcing them to insert extra vocabulary words just for, flavor seems like it would stall the engine completely. Doesn't adding words inherently make the sentence more complicated to build?
Well, it is a completely logical concern if you are only looking at the speaker's cognitive load.
Right.
But conversation is a two-way street. You aren't just building an engine to spin and avoid. You are building a vehicle carrying a passenger, and that passenger is your listener.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, these tiny words Emma's teaching aren't extra gears in the engine. They are the suspension system of the car.
Suspension system.
Exactly. A stripped-down car without a suspension system will still get you from point A to point B. I mean, mechanics work.
Right, it drives.
But every single rock and pothole on the road is going to violently jolt the passenger. In language, a grammatically perfect but overly brief sentence acts exactly like that rigid car.
Wow.
It delivers the information, but it jolts the listener because it's so abrupt. You aren't adding these words to make the grammar complex. You are adding them to absorb the shock of raw data. You're lowering the cognitive load for the listener, which makes the exchange feel smooth and native.
You're softening the blow of the information. That makes a lot of sense. And it brings us right into the architecture of the very first word Emma introduces to Jack to demonstrate this shock absorption.
Yes, let's get into the words.
Word number one is just.
J-U-S-T, just.
Yeah. Emma provides Jack with two incredibly straightforward examples. She says, I just finished my work, and I just called you. Jack immediately digests these examples and realizes, so instead of saying, I finished my work, I can say, I just finished my work.
What's fascinating here is why Jack's realization is so critical to conversational pragmatics.
Right. Tell me about that.
If we look at the sentence, I finished my work, in isolation, it is grammatically flawless. The human communication is rarely about just exchanging sterile facts.
Yeah, nobody talks like that.
Right. If you walk into a room and flatly announce, I finished my work, it lands like a brick.
It sounds like a status report from a robot. Or worse, depending on your tone, it can sound incredibly dismissive, like it has this aggressive finality to it. It signals the end of an interaction rather than an invitation to engage.
Because it lacks a temporal buffer. It is raw data without context. But the moment Jack adds the word just, like I just finished my work, the entire psychological dynamic of the interaction shifts.
How so?
Just acts as a pragmatic marker that implies immediate recency. It tells the listener, this event occurred mere moments ago, and you are the first person I am sharing this fresh information with.
Oh, wow. It pulls the listener into your immediate timeline.
Yes.
It changes the statement from a closed door into an open window. You are no longer reporting data, you are sharing an update.
Exactly.
It's an incredibly subtle social cue packed into a tiny four-letter package. And Emma validates this underlying psychology immediately. She tells Jack, exactly, it sounds more natural in conversation.
Because native speakers instinctively know that bluntness can be perceived as rudeness or coldness, we constantly use words like just to manage the social temperature of an exchange.
That's a great phrase, the social temperature.
Yeah, it smooths the transition between the action that was completed and the conversation that is currently happening.
So just is our shock absorber for the immediate past. It handles actions that literally just concluded. But, navigating a conversation isn't only about what happened 5 seconds ago.
No, definitely not.
We also have to manage the invisible expectations we carry around about when things are supposed to happen. And this misalignment of timelines leads Emma directly to her next concept. Word number 2 is already.
Emma gives Jack 2 specific scenarios for this one. She says, I already ate lunch, and she already knows the answer. Now,
Jack listens to these examples and doesn't just passively accept them. He actively deduces the underlying mechanical rule. He asks, so already means something happened before expected.
And that deduction cuts right to the heart of why already is such a crucial piece of linguistic suspension.
Right.
Human beings are constantly operating on shared invisible schedules. We make assumptions about what other people know, what they have done, and what they're going to do. Already is the tool we use when those invisible schedules clash.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's contextualize that with Emma's lunch example.
Okay, let's do it.
If you and I work in the same office, there's a general societal expectation that lunch happens around noon or maybe 1:00 p.m. If I walk up to your desk at 11:30 a.m. and invite you to grab food and you simply reply, I ate lunch, my brain experiences a micro moment of confusion.
Oh, completely.
It violates the expected timeline. I might wonder if you are talking about yesterday, or if you eat at 10 a.m., or if you are just, shutting me down.
Yeah, the raw data, I ate lunch, creates friction because it doesn't acknowledge the gap between my expectation and your reality.
Right.
But when you say, I already ate lunch, you are deploying a pragmatic marker that specifically addresses that gap. You are signaling to me, I know you assumed I hadn't eaten yet based on the normal timeline, but my action preceded that shared expectation.
It saves face for both people. It prevents the listener from feeling foolish for asking, and it softens the rejection of the invitation. It manages the interpersonal friction perfectly.
It really does.
And Emma confirms that Jack's deduction is spot on. But what happens next in the source material isn't just a continuation of the lecture. It's actually a fascinating look at the psychology of adult learning.
It's a crucial moment. Jack grasps the concept of already managing expectations, and he immediately applies it to his own current state.
Yeah, he says spontaneously, "Wow, I'm already learning fast."
He takes the concept he learned, literally seconds prior, and uses it in his own natural, unscripted speech to describe the process of learning the concept itself.
It's so meta.
It is. It is a brilliant example of shifting from passive theory to active execution. Emma catches this instantly and highlights it for him, saying, "See, you used it correctly."
Which is huge for a learner.
Exactly. To understand why this matters, we have to look at the cognitive hurdles of acquiring a new skill. Adult learners often get trapped in declarative memory, memorizing rules, staring at vocabulary lists, intellectualizing the language.
Right, they know all the grammar rules.
Yeah, they know about the language, but they can't actually use it.
Right, because there's a vulnerability in actually speaking. You are terrified of making a mistake, so you default to the safest, most rigid, robotic sentence structures possible. You leave out the suspension sister entirely because you're just trying to keep the engine running.
Exactly. When Jack says, "I'm already learning fast," he has crossed the bridge from declarative memory into procedural memory.
Wow.
He isn't reciting a drill. He is communicating a genuine feeling of surprise and pride. He recognizes that his progress is happening faster than he expected, and he naturally reaches for the exact pragmatic marker designed to express that specific timeline clash.
And you can really feel the momentum shift in the exchange. Jack tells Emma, "I'm getting good at this." He feels a sense of mastery. He isn't overwhelmed by the skyscraper of vocabulary anymore, you know?
He sees the blocks differently now.
Right. He realizes he can fundamentally alter his fluency with tiny, manageable adjustments. This positive feedback loop is what gives him the confidence to tackle the final piece of the timeline puzzle.
Which is so important. We've established how to handle the immediate past with just, and how to navigate unexpected timelines with already.
Right.
But human experience isn't only made up of things that are finished. We spend a massive amount of our lives in a state of ongoing, unresolved action. To give Jack a truly complete conversational toolkit, Emma has to address the present continuous.
Which brings us to word number 3. Still.
Emma sets the stage with two highly relatable examples for any language learner. She says, "I'm still learning English," and "Are you still watching that show?"
Jack, operating on that newfound confidence, immediately isolates the function of the word. He deduces, "So still means something continues."
If we look at the underlying psychology of continuation, still is a word of endurance. It is a marker that implies persistence in the face of time or potential obstacles.
Okay, I like that. Persistence.
Yeah, it signals that a state of being remains constant despite an expectation that it might have ended.
Think about the difference in the narrative arc between saying, "I learn English," and "I am still learning English."
Oh, it's night and day.
Right. If someone asks about your hobbies and you say, "I learn English," it is a static fact. It just sits there on the table. But if you say, "I am still learning English," you are acknowledging the journey.
You are communicating dedication. The word "still" wards off the assumption that you might have given up, or that the process should have been completed by now. It tells the listener that you are currently in the trenches with this endeavor. It provides an emotional context to a grammatical fact.
It creates a shared empathy. Emma confirms Jack's definition, but Jack doesn't just want to stop at understanding the isolated definitions of these 3 words.
No, he wants to put it to use.
He wants to test the entire suspension system he just built. He says to Emma, "Okay, let me try."
He initiates a final test of his own accord. He takes all 3 concepts and weaves them into a single, cohesive narrative. He says, "I just finished my homework. I already watched the movie. I'm still learning English."
Let's look closely at what he's doing here, because it is the ultimate validation of Emma's core premise. He isn't just listing vocabulary words like a table of contents, right?
No, not at all.
He is demonstrating functional narrative fluency. He builds a chronological bridge that perfectly maps a human day.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a sophisticated use of conversational pragmatics. First, he anchors the listener in his immediate past. "I just finished my homework."
Right, there's that temporal buffer.
Exactly, he creates the buffer. Second, he manages the listener's expectations regarding a past event. "I already watched the movie." He resolves a potential timeline clash. And finally, he pivots to his ongoing dedication in the present. "I'm still learning English."
He strings them together seamlessly. I mean, the raw grammatical data of those sentences, finishing homework, watching a movie, learning English is incredibly basic.
Very basic.
A first-week student could understand the verbs and nouns, but by inserting those three specific shock absorbers, Jack elevates the sentences from a robotic checklist into a natural conversational update you might hear in any coffee shop.
And Emma, recognizing the synthesis, gives him a resounding perfect.
Yeah.
What Jack has achieved here is the realization that fluency is largely about rhythm and flow, not just academic complexity.
Absolutely.
He arrives at his own unprompted conclusion stating, 3 tiny words.
Yeah.
Big difference.
He has completely dismantled his own skepticism from the beginning of the lesson. He no longer views fluency as a massive, overwhelming task. He sees it as the strategic application of small, manageable adjustments. Which brings Emma's lesson to a close. She wraps up her show by giving her audience a direct, practical call to action.
She says, that's today's lesson, everyone. Try using just, already, and still today, and your English will start sounding more natural.
She is pushing her listeners to do exactly what Jack did. She is urging them to step out of declarative memory and into procedural memory.
Right, take the car for a spin.
Exactly. Don't just understand the theory behind the suspension system. Actually take the car out on the road and feel how these words absorb the shock of everyday conversation.
Because language is ultimately a tool for human connection. The data transfer is secondary. The real goal is to be understood without causing unnecessary cognitive friction for the person you are speaking with.
So what does this all mean for us? We started this deep dive talking about the heavy lifting of language learning, the towering, intimidating skyscraper of grammar and vocabulary.
The stuff that scares people away.
Right. But what this breakdown of Emma and Jack's exchange reveals is that the most profound improvements in how we communicate often come from the smallest, most targeted adjustments.
Yeah, it isn't about replacing the engine. It's about adding the suspension.
Words like just, already, and still are the invisible social glue. They are the unsung heroes of fluency that transform rigid facts into relatable human conversation.
They lower the cognitive load, they manage expectations, they acknowledge shared timelines, they do massive amounts of psychological heavy lifting while taking up almost no space in a sentence.
Which leaves me with a thought that I want you to take with you today. We've spent this entire time analyzing the psychological architecture of 3 specific tiny English words and how they dramatically alter the landscape of a conversation. It completely shifts how you view the mechanics of sounding natural.
Oh, sure.
But it also makes you wonder about the universal nature of this phenomenon. If just 3 tiny words are the secret engine of natural English fluency, what tiny, seemingly invisible words in our own native languages are secretly doing the exact same heavy lifting right now, absorbing the shock of our daily communication without us ever even noticing?